Hey guys, what's going on? I know it's been a while. My wife is due in less than a month, so my priorities have shifted, but I've scraped together the time to read 3 obscure science fiction novels, trying to find a diamond in the rough. And if you don't think these are obscure, consider how few people read for pleasure. Then consider you're watching a very small YouTuber talk about one specific genre of books that were written more than 50 years ago. Not to make you feel insignificant, but we're part of a very exclusive club, and admit it, we all kind of revel in that obscurity. Anyways, first one I got for you today is The Masks of Time by Robert Silverberg. 3rd or 4th book of his I've read, enjoyed them all. I doubt he's ever written a boring one. This is odd. Someone decided to write the author's initials on the pages of this book, unless coincidentally it was also the former owner's initials. We'll never know. Irrelevant. Anyways, the setting is 1999. The world is ripe with chaos, disease, political strife, and a mysterious man appears in Europe, claims to be from the future, and razzle-dazzles everyone with some fancy technology. He draws the world's attention, and pretty soon everybody is taking his word as gospel. We view this all from some sort of notable scientist who has been studying time travel for the last 20 years and has hit a dead end. He's very logical about it, and perhaps in a self-serving way, he's convinced it's just some random grifter who is not from the future at all. And that is the main question that brings you through the entire book, and one that Silverberg handles very well. You're never quite sure who this guy is, what his angle is, but you watch as the world follows him and desperately wants him to be from the future, wants him to have all of the solutions that they need at the time, and also prove that there is a future. Because the year is 1999, and we all knew what we thought was happening in the year 1999. So here was proof that the world does not end, that everybody does have a future. So our main character is put into this group of escorts that bring this potential time traveler around the world and show him what we have to offer. And it's really interesting how Silverberg brings up certain topics. Like he says, there is no money in the future. So all of the bankers, all of the stockbrokers, all of the financiers have this identity crisis because what they are currently doing is useless in the future. And I was surprised how much of an impact that had on me, imagining certain examples like in the future they say they don't eat meat. How would that make me feel about eating meat now? I'm really not sure. Should I hold myself to the standards of the future? And that's what I can always expect from Silverberg. He knows how to write a compelling story. He uses a lot of primal motivators to get you through it, if you know what I mean, but he always makes you think. Surprisingly. They could be in some sort of futuristic techno brothel, but you're considering some kind of philosophical idea. Definitely true here, especially in terms of cult mentalities and how willing people are to export their life's decisions onto somebody else. Still true today, obviously. I guess I see the appeal. In times of uncertainty, I guess people will always seek certainty, even though that doesn't really exist, and the people telling you that it does are lying to you so that they can control you. I mean, that's Cult 101. In this book, does this time traveler want to control people? Gotta read it to find out. Not gonna spoil it that hard. All right, next, what I'm gonna call the unofficial sequel to The Masks of Time, Behold the Man by Michael Moorcock. I really didn't know what to expect from this one because I thought Moorcock was more fantasy. I've only heard his name in terms of the Elric saga, which is epic fantasy. And also, the cover art of this book definitely asks some questions, and I wondered what people thought I was reading on the bench in the park. It's a time travel story and a concept I'm surprised I hadn't heard of before. The guy goes back to find out what really happened with the whole Jesus thing. So that's year 0 or year 5 or whatever it is. And the story is told in tandem with the main character's upbringing. So we learn who he is, how he was shaped, and why he might have made that decision to go back. Maybe I haven't heard of this concept before because it's completely blasphemous, or I imagine it's completely blasphemous. And if the Christian church somehow regained control of the world, Michael Moorcock would be burned at the stake for sure. Although Christianity seems to be the whipping boy in so many of these older science fiction novels. You know, back in the 60s or 70s when Christianity still had some power and the people were realizing maybe it shouldn't have that much power, so let's poke some holes in it. And honestly, I'm not sure if Michael Moorcock is doing that here. He's just kind of using the story of Christianity as a means to tell his own time travel science fiction story, which is interesting. It definitely leaves you at the end with a familiar time travel idea of, wait, if he went back and did that, then what would happen in the future? But then he wouldn't be in the future, and which is always fun. I hadn't had that interaction in a while. Also, I'm calling this the unofficial sequel because if it had been written by Robert Silverberg, I would have believed it 100%. Very similar writing styles, not afraid to touch on taboo things, quick pacing, entertaining. We get the backstory of this main character, which is at many times painful to read, but very real and garners a lot of sympathy, and also evokes a lot of philosophical thought. Carl Jung once again makes an appearance in the books that I read. The main character connects a lot with Carl Jung and his teachings, and his girlfriend at the time does not. So she argues with him about it, belittles him. A good way to garner sympathy for a character. Worked well for me. Would recommend it, unless you are a devout Christian, in which case it would probably incense you. But at the same time, if a comment on this video tells me Michael Moorcock is actually a prominent figure in the Christian community, I would believe it. I've been surprised by that kind of thing before. And the last one I got for you is The Overman Culture by Edmund Cooper. I actually got this from Bookpilled on one of his Whatnot auctions. I believe he said it was obscure. He may have heard of the author long ago, but that's what I was looking for. Books that you would have a hard time finding a review for on the internet, which are pretty rare. This one's about a group of young kids in England who feel like they're the only sensitive people in their entire community. They feel like something is off, like they are different. And that's the question that drives you through the whole story. But I have to say, he doesn't handle it as well as Robert Silverberg does. You kind of know the answer maybe a quarter of the way through the book if you read a lot of science fiction. But there is still a thread of uncertainty because they're children. They're naive, they don't really know how the world works. Maybe they're just looking at it through a strained lens. And it still has appeal even if you see where it's going, like The Truman Show, which admittedly this book is very much like. You know the main character is in a television show from the very beginning. That's not what drives you through the story. You want to see them get out. You want to see what happens when he escapes. And it got to a very similar point in this book where you more or less know what's going on, but you want the kids to find it out for themselves and to see what happens afterwards. Which is different than something like Never Let Me Go by Ishiguro, which needs that surprise ending to give it the effect that it does. Unless you're my dad, who I let borrow that book and apparently knew what was going on by page 4. The book is very brisk, very easy breezy. You could probably finish it in a day, which was good for me because my attention has been very divided recently. Haven't had a lot of time for reading, but I always want reading to be a part of my life, and as long as it is, I'll be making these videos. If you haven't realized by now, this is just a glorified reading journal. I decided to stop writing it down and filming myself instead and sharing it with the world, or infecting the world, if you didn't like my opinion of Dracula in my last video, which many didn't. But I try and keep the same honesty that I would have in a reading journal. These are my genuine feelings about the books that I'm reading, and they're not filtered to appeal to the widest audience. So I can't guarantee that these videos will continue in any metered frequency, but they will continue. Didn't find any gems here, I gotta say. Some emeralds, some rubies, but I enjoyed all of these. Definitely 6s and 7s, maybe an 8. But as always, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you next time, whenever that is. Bye-bye.